RGE here, and I'm taking a look at They Bleed Pixels, a highly stylistic action platformer developed by Spooky Squid Games. I tried to say spooky-like, but no, it wasn't gonna happen. We'll start off with the graphics options. There aren't any, basically. There's not even resolution options. Actually, this game runs exclusively in 720p. Purely because of the style of the game, it's not really a con not having a full set of graphic options, because it's all done in pixel art, and so it's not going to deteriorate the fidelity of the graphics when you stretch them out onto like a higher resolution. However, I'd like to see at least like an aspect ratio setting, because I know that like I personally didn't even have a 16:9 monitor until I started making videos like full time a year and a half or 2 years ago or something like that. Full time. I don't do this full time, by the way. I make a lot of videos, but I have to have a real job. I don't get paid anything to do this basically, so. But yeah, it would be nice to see some at least an aspect ratio setting. It would be even nicer to see a resolution setting, because I know that in PC gaming, 16:10s are still really popular. Even though they give basically no graphic options, they actually do really well on all the other option sets, especially control options. So, I played the game using a gamepad, so I'm not going to say the keyboard controls are great. I'm not going to say they're bad either. But what I can tell you about them is that they're completely rebindable. Every single control, including on the gamepad, is rebindable. So, even if the default keyboard ones are kind of trash, I'm certain that there's a way that you can make them good. Now, I know that you'll still probably have a better time playing with a gamepad than a keyboard, and it's primarily because of just like the style of this game. Most games in this genre are just better with the gamepad because of the extra precision that you get out of having an analog joystick for your movement controls. You just get more directions available than what you have digitally, because digitally you really only have, what, 8? There's 8 ways to move if you use a digital input, basically. So, you're gonna have a better time, probably, with the joystick. Just something to keep in mind, really. So, stylistically, this game has figured out what they want to do. It's kind of like this Lovecraft, pixel art, retro style. Backgrounds tend to be in like this ink paper style, like it looks like it was done with inks on paper. Ink paper. Makes sense. It's actually the difference in the style for the foreground and the background being so completely different is pretty good in a genre like this, because it makes the foreground really stand out. It makes it really obvious what you can travel on and where enemies are and where hazards in the world are, and that's something that's kind of important in a game like this, because I mean, to run into a set of spikes that look like they're in the background and then dying would be total BS. All the music for this game is electro. I'm not really gonna say if the music's good or not, because to be honest, I don't listen to electro. I mostly listen to like garage music and folk. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we've got no idea if it's any good, because I'm not versed in the genre. It's all composed by a guy named DJ Fiendishly, so I mean, that's a thing. The movement feels a lot like Super Meat Boy. I mean, it's an obvious inspiration for this game. You jump up walls in a similar fashion, you slide down walls, you jump from wall to wall. Just looking at the game, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, it's a lot like Super Meat Boy in the movement. What this game does totally differently is that it has a combat system. Unlike most games in this kind of style, They Bleed Pixels has a combo-based fighting system that sort of breaks up the pace, makes it so that you have to fight some guys on some platforms, and then you go back to platforming. Preferably very quickly, because that's just the type of game this is. It's a speed platformer, basically. Besides breaking up the pace, getting combos in combat actually has a really important purpose. Levels in They Bleed Pixels are a lot bigger than in a game like Super Meat Boy or a game like Dust Force, where you're really just trying to speed run through about 15 seconds of content. The levels are huge in comparison, and so when you get a max combo bar, you can create a checkpoint in the level, so that if you die, you go back to that checkpoint. You can only create the checkpoints, though, if you fill up the combo bar. So every once in a while, you're going to have to stop and kill a guy in order to fill up your combo bar, just so you can create a checkpoint. Because, trust me, it's infuriating to get almost to the end of the level and then die without a goddamn checkpoint. So far, They Bleed Pixels has been stupidly hard in some parts. It's not really that hard to beat a level. There's some finicking that you'll do. You'll die a few times figuring out how you get through the level the first time. And obviously, if you go back and replay a level, you should get a better time. But to really complete it, that's going to take a lot of time to figure out. Because to complete a level, you need to kill all of the enemies, and you need to get all the collectibles. And obviously, to get a higher rating on the level, you need to do all of this in a good amount of time, too. There's some collectibles that I've seen just in like the first 4 levels that I have no idea how you'd ever get to them. I spent like 15 minutes trying to get this one collectible, and I just couldn't do it. There was no way that I could ever figure it out. And it's actually one of the things that this game does pretty well, is that the collectibles are basically on like the fastest path through the game. However, there's secondary paths. So you don't necessarily always have to go through the same path to beat the level, but there's one clearly defined path that is the hardest path, but also the fastest path. It's something that other games in the genre don't have. A lot of games that are based around speedrunning tend to only end up with one really challenging path, and then no other options. But this game has multiple paths. If you aren't really into the speedrunning, but you just want to do like the platforming part, and you don't want to deal with the infuriatingly frustrating hard parts of this game, you can get around them. There are secondary paths that will get you around them. They're still hard. This game still has a lot of really hard parts. The game's challenging, but there's certainly easier paths than the main path. I think that the people who really like this sort of game can already tell if they'd like They Bleed Pixels. The game controls are really clean. The levels are well designed. It's challenging. It's got style. It feels familiar to games that we've already played, but it has enough setting it apart to make it fresh, and it just feels like it executed everything that it set out to do well. The game just feels fulfilled. They Bleed Pixels is just a great addition to a group of infuriatingly challenging speedrunning Twitch platformers. That's awfully specific. But I think anyone who really enjoys games like Super Meat Boy or Dust Force are likely to enjoy They Bleed Pixels, because it's a genre that just hasn't been oversaturated yet. There's not a lot of games that have this specific type of playstyle. It's kind of like a genre that's emerging still. And so I think that anyone who's already a really big fan of the genre probably hasn't gotten sick of games like Super Meat Boy, because I can't think of many of them off the top of my head. Really, the only two standouts are Super Meat Boy and Dust Force. Also, totally unrelated to anything about the quality of this game, but purely based on the challenging aspects of this game, I'm gonna call it, in about a week, maybe 2 weeks, this game blows up as a Let's Play, and everyone does one. You mark my words. I'm watching you, YouTubers. I know that you're gonna make those Let's Plays. I'm gonna see them. I'm gonna hate them.